appropriate way is to give us a call at 866-55-PRESS. Either way, we're glad to hear from you. And we always tell you that one of the reasons we love being on Capitol Hill is because, we can occasionally snag a senator or a member of Congress on their way to work, walking to the Capitol. And we're very pleased to welcome to the studio today a good friend, a longtime friend from California, Congressman John Garamendi.
Great to be with you, Bill.
Good to see you.
Love your show.
A neighbor, as well.
We live nearby here in Capitol Hill. It's just a 10-minute walk to get to your place.
It's a good neighborhood, isn't it?
It's a great neighborhood. Eastern Market. Can't go wrong.
Isn't it? It's really the heart, at least of this end of Washington.
Well, it's the heart of the best part because this is where you live.
This is where we live, yes, indeed. And then there are some people like, I won't mention any names, who live in German.
His staff.
I he lives in Pennsylvania, I think.
Practically.
Yeah, they're commuters.
Yeah.
Fouling the air, clogging the house.
There you go.
Hey, I drive a Prius. That helps.
That helps.
Peter Ogburn joined by Jamie Benson.
Here we are.
Ray Rogers and Cyprian Bolding, our entire team, and we welcome you all. Congressman, there's some weird stuff going on the political scene, as you know, and the Republicans are not happy with the tough questions they got at the debates, right? Now, you've been a candidate several times yourself. I mean,
Actually, 29 times.
Is that right? Okay. Well, running for office, I mean, answering tough questions is one of the things you kind of have to do, right?
You should expect it. And you should expect any kind of question. When you're standing there, it can come from left field. In fact, it can come from outer space, and suddenly you got to deal with it.
Right.
And stop whining. It's the game. It's the way it is.
Thank you. So I just wanted to, before we get started in the issues of the day, so Ted Cruz actually came up with this crazy idea that if you haven't voted in a Republican primary, you cannot be a moderator in a Republican primary debate. So he goes on Fox News last night, and even Megyn Kelly of Fox News has to say, this is nonsense. Here she is.
Let me challenge you on that. Do you have any idea whether Brett Baier or Chris Wallace have ever voted in a Republican primary?
I have no idea, and I'm guessing you may tell me whether Megyn Kelly has.
So neither do I. I have no idea, but I can tell you as a fact that those are two of the most fair, talented journalists in the business. So under your rule, they could potentially be excluded from anchoring a presidential debate.
Just shows how crazy it is, right? Tim Russer, Jim Lehrer. I mean, think about people who moderated debates.
Well, don't you think that we ought to be able to choose who the moderator is, and we ought to know the questions ahead? In fact, we ought to give them the questions ahead of time.
That's next. That's next. Yeah. No,
that's not the game. I mean, you got to stand up there and take the heat, and the questions come from left field. You got to be able to field them, because after all, you want to be president of the United States.
Yeah, and I thought President Obama made a great point the other day when he says, boy, if you're afraid of Anderson Cooper, the Chinese and the Russians are not going to be afraid of you, right?
I suppose so.
So what's going on in the House, Congressman, with a new speaker, a new day, and we're going to get all kinds of things done, right?
For a while. Through all the easy stuff, yes. But the underlying division in the Republican Party didn't disappear. In fact, it was probably enhanced because they were successful in getting rid of Boehner. And so now they've got a notch on their belt, and we'll see what happens. But that problem remains, and it'll show itself many, many times over the next year and a half.
So the Freedom Caucus, you believe, is still as strong as it ever was?
You mean the Tea Party caucus?
Yes, right. That so-called Freedom Caucus.
Yeah,
right.
Well, it's really the Tea Party group.
Yeah.
It's even stronger. Because they won.
Right.
They won. And, they're quiet right now. They've got their victory. Now, Ryan is in a very, very difficult situation because that split, the Tea Party caucus and the more traditional Republicans, that split is still there. And that is a very, very tenuous coalition.
Is he we don't know that much about Paul Ryan, and his initial statements I find are kind of contradictory. Everybody says, well, this is a guy that we can work with, right? This is a guy who wants to get things done. And yet at the same time, he says, I'm going to abide by the Hastert rule.
Well, that's the problem that they're going to have in their caucus. Because the Hastert rule says the majority of their caucus has to go along, but there's a significant minority that won't. And that significant minority is enough to take away the speakership. You need 218 continuing solid votes to be speaker. And if you don't have that 218, then you've got to go to that caucus and cut a deal with them. And what they want is not good for this nation, and certainly not good for the operations of Congress.
On immigration reform, a big problem that we've faced in California for 30, 40 years, right, and facing this nation, after the shellacking that Mitt Romney got in 2012, the Republicans said, boy, we know what we've got to do. We've got to take the lead on immigration reform, right? Obviously now
it went exactly the opposite direction.
Exactly the opposite. And Paul Ryan was asked about it yesterday at his news conference, and he said, we're not going to do any immigration reform with President Obama because we don't trust him.
Well, this is really foolish. First of all, if we do immigration reform, it'll be done next year, which is an election year. We ought to do it. There's an enormous need to do something. It would not be implemented. There's nothing that the president could do because the law would not be implemented during his term. It would be the next president that would be left to implement it. So that argument is it's foolish argument. It does not stand the test of the calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So come on, there must be another reason. The reason is that you're scared to death of that Tea Party caucus.
Plus, the plan that President Obama has, which is kind of doing something even more on border security, even though he's done a lot already, a path to citizenship, and making sure that the current law where employers cannot just hire people who are here illegally, those three planks of it, that's basically the same thing that George W. Bush proposed when he was president. And Republicans in the past supported.
Yeah, exactly. We've known for 5 years now what a comprehensive immigration reform bill looks like. It's those things. Border security. No, we're not going to go build a wall, but we do need border security. It's all part of what it is. We need to have a way of testing that a person is or is not here legally, and that's part of the e-verification. We need to have we got to regularize, that is, bring people out of the dark, put them out there so that we know who they are, give them the papers that they need. Some will want to become citizens, others won't. They can go in the line. Some will have to pay fines. That's good. All of those things. We've known this all along. And then we need to have certain visa opportunities for those particular classifications of workers that are not available in the United States. For example, agricultural workers and some high tech.
Mm-hmm. So we know what the answer.
We've known for months, years.
And if you put it up for a vote, if they would just hold a vote on the floor of the House today?
Well, it'd be close. It would be close. But if you did this, if you took those 5 elements and you broke them into separate bills and do what we used to do in the California legislature, which is to tie them all together, so you would get the liberals, progressives voting for probably all of it, maybe not, but they'd vote for it. The conservatives would vote for theirs. You'd be able to cobble together enough votes, and all of the individual bills would then go to the president's desk at the same time. He'd sign them. Good, we've got it done. Those who could not vote for e-verification, they get off the hook. So you could do it.
All right, so that's called governing, right?
Yes.
Another way that we used to see governing work was on transportation bills. Now, you're on the House Transportation Committee. I remember Ray LaHood.
Yeah.
When he was Republican, named by President Obama as his first Secretary of Transportation. He came into our briefing room down at the White House a couple of years ago, pleading with his fellow Republicans to pass the transportation bill, a 5-year bill so people could make their plans and everything. And he used this phrase, I've never seen a Republican road or a Democratic road. They're just roads that need fixing.
And we really do. We have an enormous need. 63,000 bridges across the United States likely to fall down, or at least fall apart. We've got highways, potholes everywhere. We've got congestion. We have Amtrak that needs to be upgraded. We've got to get the positive train control in. We've got freight issues. The economy is slowed down because of our transportation infrastructure system is not the 20th century. It's about the 19th century. Look at many of these bridges were built in the 1800s. So we need to do this, and we're not going to get the job done. It's just not going to happen. It's an enormous disappointment to me and frustration.
Well, it must be. And what are the arguments against it? I mean,
we will have a 6-year bill. There's a 6-year bill. Mm-hmm. The problem is it continues the inadequate funding that we have today. We know that the funding that exists, even with the start-stop, the short-term kick the can down the road, the funding levels are woefully inadequate. I mean, the funding levels continue the deterioration of the system. So we've got a 6-year bill that locks in for 6 years an inadequate amount of money, which will guarantee that at the end of the 6 years, we'll be worse off than we are today. And I'm going, what in the world do we want to do that for? Well, apparently we're going to do it.
So in other words, there's just enough money kind of to keep things the way they are now, but not to make any improvements or build any new?
Yes and no. No new projects, some new projects, but nothing that we really need. And it will not be enough money to maintain what we have. And so we will see a continuing decline, deterioration in the quality of what we have. There'll be some new projects built here and there across the nation, but the kind of really robust infrastructure investment that China's made, that Europe has made, not going to happen.
And that at one time we made with pride. I mean, we in California always talk about Pat Brown, right? The great builder, built the state university system, the state water project, and the state highway system. Dwight Eisenhower built the interstate highway system. This used to be a point of pride, right? For building things. We don't do it anymore.
Exactly. We're afraid to invest in the future. In fact, there's a part of that Tea Party caucus wants to do what's called devolution, and that is to get the federal government out of this entirely and to send it all back to the states. So you're running down Interstate 80 from the East Coast to the West Coast, and somewhere in the middle there's a state that says, not my problem, and that part of the road just gone.
Yeah, and you're back to a 2-lane road with stoplights.
Gravel. It just... This country was built on the best infrastructure in the world, and we've lost that.
How much of the problem with the transportation funding is due to the fact that cars are getting better mileage, people are paying less in gas taxes, therefore the source of the revenue is way down? Fundamental problem. That's a real
and
problem.
There's two pieces to it. First of all, the last time the gasoline and diesel tax, federal, was raised was 1993. So we're talking a long, long time ago.
Yeah.
And so the inflation is eaten into that. It's probably worth less than half in terms of being its actual value. And exactly what you said. Cars are at least twice the miles per gallon, at least twice.
And they're going to get better.
Even more so.
Well, they're required to under the new CAFE
standards. And then you've
standards.
got electric cars, hydrogen power, compressed natural gas, none of which pay a tax. And so there'll be free riders on the system, and there'll be more and more of that. The bottom line of it is that the revenue that comes in has declined in its value and in the amount that's coming in, even though the number of cars has doubled. Yeah. So this is the fundamental underlying problem, is we're not raising the revenue necessary to even keep pace.
So what's the answer? Raising the gas tax?
You just cleared the hall saying that word.
I know.
Everybody just disappears. Whoa. It's really interesting. Not to name names, but one of the big Republican organizations came in a couple of years ago to meet with the Democrats on the committee and said, you've got to raise the gasoline tax and the diesel tax. And went on and on and on. I mean, this is one of the most powerful Republican operation and the leader. And I guess I had the temerity to say, so we do that, and then we go to the next election, and you attack us for raising the gasoline tax? And he looked at us and he said, well, he didn't answer the question. So the reality is, everybody knows that this is something that could be done and arguably should be done. But all of us know that if we do it, it becomes the principal weapon used against us in the next election, and therefore nothing happens. But there are ways we can do this, and in fact the president suggested a way of doing it, and then, to my mind, unfortunately didn't push the issue. And that is, American corporations are hiding their profits overseas. And there's a notion of repatriating, that is to bring those profits back and tax them at literally less than half of the normal corporate tax rate. The president's proposal would raise about $150 billion over the next 5 to 6 years. You add that to the existing gasoline and diesel tax, and we can increase the funding by $140, $150 billion, which will move us forward, repair the roads, keep things in good repair, repair the bridges, and add to the ability to move in our nation, making critical investments.
Yeah, that's a sound plan. That's a way of doing it. It's Congressman John Garamendi, member of the House Transportation Committee here from California with the latest news of the day. Give us a call if you want, or if you have a question or a comment at 866-55-PRESS. Quick break. We'll be right back.
This is the Bill Press Show.
27 minutes after the hour, here with Congressman John Garamendi, representing the 3rd Congressional District from California. Congressman, I just wanted to note that what we were just talking about, this plan of repatriating this money or whatever you call it, you've offered that as an actual amendment to the Highway Transportation.
I did last night in Rules Committee, and the idea is I did two things. One is to increase the funding level to what the President suggested, which would be an additional $140-some billion.
Which will enable us to get things done and to build for the future.
We could actually invest and build for the future, put people to work. You'd put a couple million people to work within a year if you did that, and then pay for it by American corporations that have skipped out on their obligation to this country. They've simply avoided paying their fair share of what it takes to run this country. So bring that money back, put that into this transportation for the infrastructure investment, which would be good for them in the long run.
Sure.
So let's do it. Will it happen? Well, they haven't. The Rules Committee hasn't yet. I don't know if they've made a decision to allow that to come to a vote on the floor. We'll see.
We're just out of time, but I hope you're also getting some support from people like the Chamber of Commerce or the National Association of Manufacturers or classic Republican groups ought to be for this as well.
Well, this is the thing. We could and should have built a coalition around a robust, fully funded transportation bill. It didn't happen. Now we have 6 years of mediocrity.
John Garamendi, great to see you, Congressman. Thanks so much for coming in.